So welcome everyone to Marriage Matters, Tools for a Healthy Relationship, session number 2. We're going to do this old school. So if you can just click to the next slide. Unaiza?
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry, 1 second. Okay.
Okay, so about Peaceful Families Project. It is a national nonprofit 501c3 founded in 2000. Their headquarters is in Virginia, and they also have national and international reach. The mission of Peaceful Families Project is devoted to ending domestic violence in Muslim families by facilitating awareness workshops for Muslim leaders and communities, providing cultural sensitivity trainings and technical assistance for professionals conducting research and developing resources. And if any of you have had a chance to look at the website, they just published several toolkits for different challenges of people going through with COVID. So they've done toolkits for imams and toolkits for family members as well. It's a great hub of resources. So I do encourage you when you get a chance to visit the website. Next slide, please. So about your trainers today, Unaiza and I are super excited to be here and to spend this little over an hour with you all. Unaiza has a master's degree in mental health counseling with an MFT focus. She resides in Tampa, Florida, works at a private practice setting, and in her free time enjoys traveling. I'm assuming that was pre-COVID though, right? Traveling and spending time in nature. My name is Deana Helmy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I reside in Orange County, California, so we couldn't be further away from each other coast-wise. I work in government, nonprofit, and private practice, and in my free time, I love board games, hiking, and bonfires. So it's a little bit about us. Good pre-afternoon or good afternoon to everyone who's here, depending on which coast or which part of the country you're in. Super excited to have you here. So why we decided to do this Marriage Matters series. So I don't know if any of you have joined. It's a 4-part series. This is part 2 of 4. But Unaiza and I got to talking. We're both Peaceful Families Project trainers. And we're talking about how you can never have enough skills for communication and relationships. And so whether you've been married for 20 years, you've been married for just recently married, or however way that is, there's always something to learn. But to get started, let's look at some myths and facts about conflict. So you're spot on, Unaiza. So arguing is a sign that the relationship is not healthy. And at this part, I'll kind of just, if you go over to your reactions or it might be in your participant, somewhere in there, you can just drop it in the chat. True, like myth or fact? Arguing is a sign that the relationship is not healthy. Myth, yes. Seeing that, awesome. People tend to think that in a healthy relationship, couples never argue. But the fact is, even healthy couples have disagreements and conflict from time to time. And actually, when they look at research, they have the same number of disagreements. So healthy and unhealthy couples have the same number of disagreements. What matters is how they're handled. Next one. So conflict only becomes abusive when there is physical violence. Conflict only becomes abusive when there is physical violence. Myth. Spot on. So abuse can occur in various forms. It can be physical, like hitting, shoving, slapping, or even sexual coercion. Abuse can also be emotional and involve things like shaming, belittling, name-calling, inducing guilt, or making comments that really undermine and devalue the other person. And it can occur inside and outside of conflict. Whoops, it's my little watch talking. So all forms of abuse are dangerous. And so we raise awareness against it and try to provide skills to prevent it. Okay, yes, next one. I am who I am. I cannot change the way I interact when I'm angry or upset. It's just who I am. Myth or fact? Yes. So while everyone reacts different ways when they're angry, frustrated, or upset, those feelings don't have to control don't have to control us. So we can control how we react to those feelings. And oftentimes we can practice and learn different strategies to cool down or calm down in order to get a handle of intense emotions and be able to navigate conflict better. And then finally, last one, the key to conflict resolution is to talk things through until you agree with each other. The key to conflict resolution is to talk things through until you agree with each other. This is one of those like, kind of, maybe, not sure. Saw one person brave enough, or a couple say myth. Awesome. Yes, myth. So 60 to come to a middle ground. I see that. Agree to disagree. You guys have like read this presentation, or what happened? You guys are spot on. 69% of marriage problems are managed through dialogue rather than being definitively solved. And this is according to research. A lot of this information, a lot of this data comes from Drs. John and Julie Gottman. So we got to give them that shout out. But oftentimes what they'll look at is they see that most disagreements come from personality differences between partners. So it's not really going to ever be resolved. But the goal is to realize that a dialogue about your contrasting perspectives is more important than trying to solve the enduring disagreement. And so the recommendation is to find ways to honor each other and respect each other's core needs and find solutions around that. Give yourselves a round of applause. Mashallah, that was awesome. So why do people fight? Take us away, Unaiza.
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to those who just joined. We're so happy to have you guys. I did want to mention that this is being recorded, but the recording will be shared with anybody who's attending and anybody who registered. So if you had a friend or someone who registered and they're not able to be here right now, I know not all the registrants could join at this specific time, you guys will receive a recording when you receive a follow-up email. And I also mentioned that to mention that we're going to give you a lot of information. And so it might seem overwhelming, but just know that it's something that you'll be able to go back and review. And if your spouse wasn't able to join today, then it's something that you guys can watch later. So we strongly recommend looking at this again to really be able to digest, but we're going to do our best to give you as much as we can in this hour and a half. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I want to recognize that, you know, everybody who's here and everybody who registered, it's such a positive step because it shows that you are committed to your relationship and you're committed to improving it and working on it. And as long as that commitment is there, I think most hurdles can be overcome. So you should applaud yourself. And that's even those who are single or in the premarital phase, you know, is just preparing yourself for what's inevitably coming in the future. So mashallah to the proactive effort. So my name is Unaiza, and we'll get started with this point. So we want to begin looking at why are we fighting so often, right? So I want to preface that with, and Deana tricked you guys because they were actually all myths. There were no facts in there, right? But arguments are a part of a relationship. Nobody can say, oh, I'm in this marriage, I'm in this relationship, and there's no arguments and there's no fighting and there's no disagreement. They are a normal part of a relationship, right? But what matters is, how do we argue, right? Do we resolve our conflicts at the end of the argument? What's the frequency of our argument? What's the intensity of our arguments, right? These are the important questions that we have to answer. So while arguments are a normal part of a relationship, when we're just kind of arguing all the time and the arguments are so intense that they are really affecting us and affecting our relationship, then that's when we have to begin to look at what could we possibly be doing differently, and how can we improve this situation, right? So if we've kind of gotten in this place in our relationship where we find ourselves like arguing more often than not, and we kind of feel like there's like this tension at home all the time, and there's this tension in our relationship. So there's a reason for that, right? And so again, crediting John and Julie Gottman, everything that Deana and I are presenting to you is research-based. They are considered like the marriage gurus, for a lack of a better term, internationally. And it's a couple that actually studied couples and conflict and what brings couples together for over 30 years. So everything we're presenting you is research-based. And the reason that they give for why couples get to this place where there's just conflict and argument all the time, the reason is a deficit in attunement, okay? So what is attunement? In simple terms, attunement is how in tune are we with each other? How much do we understand each other? How much do we respect each other's needs? How much do I understand my partner's feelings? How much do I understand their internal world and their experience? And do I even have a desire to, right? Do I even have a desire to, and am I able to? So people can score anywhere on the attunement scale from couples that are very highly attuned to those who are low in attunement. And what happens when there is a deficit in attunement, in our ability to understand each other's feelings and inability to understand each other's needs, that's when we run into a lot of conflict. And so therefore, there's a four-step trajectory that takes place when attunement is lacking. And I'm briefly going to go through all 4 steps, and they all 4 lead into each other. So these are really fancy terms that I'm going to make very simple for you. So what takes place in our relationships often is what are called sliding door moments, okay? Sliding door moments are whenever I have a moment in which I express a need to my partner. I make a bid to my partner for their attention, right? It could be honestly something as simple as, could you get me water? Do you want to watch a movie together? To something more serious as, I just found out I didn't get a promotion at work. Can we talk about it? Do you have time? Can we talk? All of those are expressions that I need you and I need your attention. Those are sliding door moments. When my spouse makes a bid for my attention, I have the option in that moment to either slide the door open and step in, or to keep the door closed and turn away, right? And opening the door and stepping in doesn't always mean that I am going to say yes to your request, because sometimes we're truly busy. But what matters is how I respond. So instead of saying, you know what, that sucks, you didn't get your promotion, but I'm sorry, I'm busy right now. If I'm busy, I say something like, you know what, I know this was so important to you. Let me just finish this up, and then I want to sit down with you and discuss this, right? So how do I respond in those sliding door moments? If I don't respond in a way that meets my spouse's need or that shows them that I care, that's what leads to a regrettable incident, right? A regrettable incident. So I'm going to continue with the same example to make it easy. So if I responded in a way that hurt my spouse, right, and they felt rejected by me, now they're hurt. So if they say to me, you know what, I really needed you. Like, I really needed you to talk to me about this. I was really hurt that I didn't get that promotion and you were just too busy, right? In that moment, I have an opportunity to either fix that or to continue the conflict. So I can fix it by making a statement like, you know what, I'm sorry. This was important to you and I should have addressed it. Or I can say, I can get defensive in that moment. What are you talking about? I told you I was busy. We'll talk later. You always do this, etc., right? So at each step, I have the option of making things better or letting them go to the next level. The next step is really important. The Zeigernick Effect is a really fancy term for something very simple. So what they found through research is that when there's a conflict in a relationship and the conflict doesn't get resolved and feelings don't get heard and there's no resolution, the conflict actually stays in my active memory. So the Zeigernick Effect shows that when things are resolved and completed, they leave my memory. When they are not resolved and they're not completed, they stay in my active memory and I rehash them over and over again. So if I'm talking to all of you right now, if you think in your mind that there's certain moments with your spouse that you play over and over again in your mind, certain fights, certain moments that you were hurt. It's because those issues never got resolved. And because they never got resolved, they stayed in your active memory. Now, one sliding moment, one regrettable incident, one negative thing in my active memory isn't going to make or break my relationship. You are inevitably going to have all of these. It's just when there is an abundance of regrettable moments and an abundance of negative experiences that never got resolved, that's when it takes my relationship from a positive experience to a negative experience. And that's when the last step kicks in, which is called a negative sentiment override, which is what happens is when there's been so much unresolved conflict and so much negativity, it actually begins to affect the overall way I look at my spouse. So I begin to look at my spouse negatively. I begin to see them not just as a person who behaves selfishly sometimes, I begin to see them as a selfish person. Not just as a person who is sometimes inconsiderate, but no, you are an inconsiderate person. And what happens is when I get to that place with my spouse, even comments or actions that are positive or neutral, I begin to interpret them negatively. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a husband decides to cook a meal one night and he doesn't normally do that. And he does it out of the goodness of his heart. The wife sees it as, oh, he must want something. He never does this. He must want something from me. Or, oh, he did this because he's actually trying to show me it's not that hard to cook and I can take the time to do it. And I actually had this moment with a couple recently where the wife told me she was leaving the house and she just made a casual comment that, oh, we need to take care of the mulch. We need to, and she didn't mean anything by it. And the husband took it to mean that he never takes care of the outside of the house. So he saw it as an attack, right? And she's like, in the session, she's going, that's not what I meant at all. I was just reminding us we need to do the mulch. But even neutral comments begin to be seen as negative because this is now how I'm viewing this person. And that's a place that we don't want to get to. And we'll talk about this some more as we go. To Deana.
Have to unmute myself. That helps. So we're talking about this attunement and a partner being in tune. So we're going to launch a poll, and don't worry, it's anonymous. So if you can just take a quick second once you see the poll launched to answer this question. How often is a partner in tune with the other? 30% of the time, 50% of the time, or 70% of the time? Yeah, there we go. So how often do you think a partner is in tune with the other? If you have no idea, just take a guess. It's all good. It's anonymous. We won't know who said what. So it's cool. We'll give it a couple of more seconds. I know sometimes people say that if they're joining on their phone, it doesn't show up or they're not able to see the poll. So that's cool. We'll go ahead and close the poll out. I guess I can end it. Okay, next slide, Unaiza. And we'll get a little drum roll going to see. Okay, so 30% of the time, that was the majority answered. Some said 50, some said 70. Guess what? It is 30% of the time. Anybody shocked? Everyone who said 30% is like, nope, we were spot on. But anyone shocked at the result? Kind of type it in the chat, or you may be typing and I'm not seeing. But if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, sad, surprising. Okay, yeah, that's kind of, that's based on research, that's what they found. So what's the likelihood that both partners are in tune with one another at the same time? Like, okay, so for me, I'm in tune with my partner 30%, they're in tune with me 30%. Guess what? The chance or the likelihood that we're in tune at the same moment is 9%. No wonder there's all this conflict, right? which means that 91% of the time it's potential breeding ground for miscommunication. Doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but it's potentially possible. So this is why it's so helpful to learn about it and learn a couple of strategies to kind of help through it, because it's way more common than we expect, and not even necessarily anybody's fault. It's just us being human and all of the demands we have on ourselves from internal and external demands that we get bombarded with causes this. So how much damage is caused by whether a couple is able to process the conflict, learn from it, and move forward? That's it's determined by how well they manage it. If it's not processed, like Unaiza said, there's the Zeigernick Effect that comes in. And so that one little incident, that conflict, stays in our active memory, and, accumulate a couple of them. And it's like one thing happens in the Rolodex of all those experiences that were unresolved come up again. And it's like, why are we still fighting about this? This happened 20 years ago, but it was never resolved. And so it's still there. Okay, so next slide. So we'll look at this. What's the solution? How do we support ourselves in getting better at this? Dr. Gottman mentions the State of the Union meetings. That's kind of what we're going to delve into in more detail. And what those are basically, they're formal meetings that a couple can have. They can schedule it once a week in order for them to practice and use their attunement skills to gain perspective. And so what will happen is they'll usually have them 1 hour weekly basis. And if there's any, if they're seeing a therapist, if they're at that point, or if they're just utilizing the services of a therapist, they're able to also process those meetings with a therapist afterwards. So, but they can also just do this on their own. As the couple gets better at these, practicing these attunement skills, they're able to sort of adjust and implement them in the moment, like right after a conflict happens. So they, as time goes by, they practice it more. It becomes a skill that they can implement on the spot versus having to wait for that weekly meeting. And just like any other skill, it practice. In the beginning, it feels very scripted, like, wait a minute, I have to actually think of everything I'm doing. Like if you think of when you first started to drive a car, right? And you sat there, and before you even turned it on, you adjusted the mirrors, you looked in your rear view, everything was, you were so thoughtful and so aware of every little step. Turn signal, look over, all that. Now you just get in the car basically and you can drive with your eyes closed, but please don't drive with your eyes closed. But that's how it becomes. It becomes second nature. You get comfortable implementing these strategies and you're able to fix or address them more in the moment. The purpose of this is basically understanding. So we look at understanding, not problem solving. And there's a special model for this that gets implemented. It's the Gottman Rappaport model. Rappaport was a 20th century social psychologist, game theorist. And if any of you have done any reading on game theory, right, it's always kind of looking at sides. It has to do with like negotiation, trying to figure out, who can win. Who wins at it, who has a greater chance of winning and losing and whatnot. And at the time when they were looking at nuclear war or the threat of nuclear war, most game theorists were looking and trying to find ways to make sure that if there was ever an event of a nuclear war, that the United States would win. Rappaport had a different approach. He was like, why don't we try to see how we can ensure that everybody is safe and increase cooperation? And so that shift, Gottman got together with Rappaport. They came up with this awesome model, which goes into how to have constructive conflict with couples, looking at this cooperation piece. And the main thing here is that don't even try to go into persuasion or problem solving or compromising until each partner can actually say to the other person what they hear to the person who's speaking satisfaction. It might sound a little bit out there, but we're going to practice with it. Unaiza is going to walk us through a nice piece of it. And so with this, the couple will take turns, and basically the goal is at the end of the day, you want people to say like, yes, I got it. I feel heard. That's exactly what I was trying to say. And they feel that they were heard and understood. And so we'll give it away to you.
Thank you. I did see a question, so I will go ahead and I've lost where my chat is. Someone asked, I believe Adeline asked, is attunement related to compatibility? So we will have Q&A at the end, but if you guys want to pop them up as we go, inshallah, we have time, we'll answer them. So attunement skills anybody can build. There's like a specific formula for how we learn to be attuned or in tune with each other. And you will see through this weekly meeting, what are some principles that we can apply and what are some specific strategies that we can utilize to learn how to be more attuned with our spouse. Compatibility is always a factor in a relationship, but attunement is not something that either we have it or we don't. It's something that very well can be learned. Just continuing on with Deana describing the weekly State of the Union meetings. So this is what this is what mainly our workshop today is about, is that we've gotten to a point in our relationship where we need to like really have a methodology for how we can sit down and really hash out like all these problems and conflicts that we're having in our relationship, right? And this is a very proven and successful strategy for couples to set aside 1 hour a week to sit down and discuss the events of that week, to discuss the conflicts of that week. And so this is proven through research. And often, like Deana, this is also another thing Deana mentioned, that often like while we're fighting, it's too hard to try and fix it because emotions are so high. So when you set aside a time, you know that it's coming up and you're not going to be in that intense emotional state that you're in conflict, right? So it's a safer time and a safer space to be able to sit down. I think Deana already mentioned all these things, that while I'm speaking and there is a persuasion part, but before I get to problem solving or compromising, we are first both going to make sure that we fully understand what the other person needs and what the other person felt, right? And this is why marital experts will say that conflict is actually a great opportunity to come closer together. This is what people don't realize, that a fight is not a bad thing. A conflict is not a bad thing, because a conflict opens the door for me to get to really know you. What triggers you? What hurts you? What happened in your past that this behavior of mine is affecting you so much, you know? So it's an opportunity actually when you come out of conflict without it turning into a fight and a screaming match, you will actually come out stronger as a couple because you'll have understood each other's deepest needs. So don't look at conflict as a negative thing. So what's important to remember, so we're going to actually walk you through this weekly meeting. We're not just like, oh, go have these meetings, because if you don't know the principles of having them, and 2 minutes later, you'll be back to screaming or yelling or whatever it is that however it is that we're used to resolving conflicts. So we're going to walk you through it. A really important point is that the listener and the speaker both have to follow the rules for this meeting to succeed. It's not that the speaker can just say whatever he or she wants and the listener has to take it. No, the speaker has to follow the rules and the listener has to follow the rules. And as Deana said, with time, they'll become more comfortable. So moving along. So this is now, I'm going to present you with the blueprint, right? To have this meeting, right? And things in life don't turn out like in steps 1, 2, and 3, but that's why a lot of these are principles. Principles are things that I can keep in mind, that even if I don't follow it like this exact blueprint, I increase my chances for success. So number 1, when you sit down, bring a whiteboard, bring paper and pencil, take notes. So if my spouse is the speaker and I'm the listener, I'm going to start writing down what they're saying. That way I can remember what they said. It won't be like, oh, it's my turn to speak. Oh my God, I totally forgot everything you just said. No, because I took notes, right? It'll help me be more present and it'll help me actually feel like more in control of the situation also. So number 1, taking notes. Number 2, pay attention for signs of flooding. I could honestly spend 20 minutes just talking to you about flooding, but I'm going to tell you in 30 seconds because we don't have the time to go into flooding. Flooding is very, very important to understand. Flooding, if you remember the last big fight that you have with your spouse, and if you can remember a moment where you were like out of your seat, on edge, you can feel your heart pumping, you can see your breath, it has gotten faster, that's flooding. Flooding is a very strong physiological response that my body goes through when I feel that I'm under attack or when I feel that I'm being threatened. It's almost, the body responds almost as if like a wildebeest is attacking it. It's like goes into fight or flight mode, okay? When you are in that mode, you cannot listen to someone, you cannot be empathetic, you cannot be understanding, you just can't. It's too much emotional intensity. If you begin to flood, you have to take a 20-minute break. In those 20 minutes, it is very important that you go do something else. If I keep thinking about how much Deana just made me mad, I will continue to flood. I have to go make a phone call, play a game, watch a funny YouTube video. I have to go do something else. Honestly, I have a husband, so men are 80% more likely to flood. So I will ask, and people flood in the therapy office. I will ask, go outside, go for a walk, come back, right? When they come back, it's like a new person because you changed your state, you changed your physiology. So really, if you keep talking through flooding, you will fight, you will get defensive, the meeting will go out the door. So go change your state, come back. Number 3, really important to start the meeting with what's going right. So when you have your first meeting, you'll notice you're really on edge, you're really nervous because you know that you're about to hear what you're doing wrong. Who wants to hear, yeah, come tell me a list of all the things I'm not doing right. So one of the ways to break the tension is to first start with appreciation, because there's so many things that both people are doing right that is not being acknowledged, right? So start by appreciating. So you know what? I noticed twice this week you bought me coffee. I didn't even have to ask. Thank you so much. You know, I noticed you just took out the trash, like even though it was my turn. You know, I realized this week when you saw I was really tired and you decided to take the kids for 3 hours. People love to be appreciated. They love it. It automatically softens the heart. You are starting the meeting on the right foot to set yourself up for success as opposed to set yourself up for failure. Last and very important point, we are only talking about the most recent conflict, the most recent disagreement. This is not the time to bring up what you did 6 months ago and what you did 5 years ago and what you did 10 years ago. If you're not ready for that yet, if you're in a state of a lot of conflict, a lot of trust has been broken in the relationship. That's what people think, trust is broken through betrayal. No, when we regularly don't meet each other's needs and when we regularly have regrettable incidents, it breaks trust in the relationship. When there's not a lot of trust, I can't talk about really deep hurts. I have to be in the safe area. That can come once the trust is built, and it has to come. But right now, I'm just going to talk about the conflict that we had this week. When I do that 1 week, when I do that a second week, when I do that a third week, now I begin to rebuild the trust in this relationship. And I can get to a place where I can talk about past hurts, right? So there's the speaker's part and the listener's part. When the speaker is speaking, they can talk as long as they need and just pour out all their thoughts and feelings and needs on the issue. All the listener is doing, the listener can speak, but the listener is not going to share at this moment their needs and feelings. They're just going to communicate back that they understand you. And we have really cool video clips of a live session for you coming up so that you can actually see this in action, right? So the listener is only speaking to communicate that I understand what you're saying. And your turn is going to come also, so don't fret. So now we're talking about the blueprint, right? So we said we're not going to just leave you hanging. We're going to tell you the principles and strategies to keep in mind during these meetings. If you just even honestly do a fourth of this, I almost want to guarantee you that you will see a change in your marriage. That's how much this stuff works. That's how much it works when people make an effort to really listen to each other and really understand each other. You can transform your marriage in 2 weeks. There's the speaker's job and there's the listener's job, and they very conveniently line up with the acronym ATTUNE. For speakers, it's awareness, maintaining a state of awareness, tolerance, and transforming criticisms into wishes. For a listener, it's understanding, non-defensive listening, and empathy. I'm going to go over the speaker's roles. Deana is going to go over the listener's job. And we know you guys may have many questions, so you can throw them in the chat, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. So the speaker's job, okay? This is very important stuff. So when you are speaking, it is not a free for all for you to just say whatever you want, however you want. Okay, we have to be tactful in how we address each other. So we want to avoid using words or style that makes my partner feel cornered and that makes them feel defensive, right? Because if someone gets defensive, again, the meeting will go out the door. Accusations and criticisms only backfire. Unless you are married to a saint, and I personally don't know any saints, no one can just sit there and feel like they're being attacked and not get defensive. So remember, we are both trying to set each other up to win. So I'm going to be very sensitive and mindful of the language that I'm using. I'm still going to express all my needs, but I'm going to be careful with the words that I use. So there are 3 pointers here. The number 1 will be a lifesaver, and you can actually use it in any relationship, and it's called using I statements. Imagine the second you hear the word you always do this, you, right? Immediately, like even when I say it to people as an example in sessions, they're like, like the second you hear the word you're just kind of taken aback. So we want to use I statement. I'm going to give you an example of an I statement. I wish you had gotten to the restaurant on time. I felt embarrassed sitting there all alone waiting for you. Versus a you statement. You were so selfish. You didn't think about how embarrassing it was for me to sit there all alone. Both people are expressing the same need. I was left at a restaurant and I was embarrassed. How differently will the listener accept number 1 versus number 2? You know why we don't use I statements? Because when we're mad, our ego is in the way. And the ego wants to say you. It's much more vulnerable to say I felt, I need. But if I can swallow my pride and make I statements, the other person won't feel attacked and they're much more likely to receive my message, right? So I statements. Number 2, specify which issue is under discussion. So specify, like what I want to talk to you about today is how you were late at the restaurant and I was embarrassed, right? Again, I. You know what I does? When you talk about I, you're talking about your experience and what you went through and what you felt versus criticizing and accusing the other person. That's the difference between I and you, right? So specify the specific issue. Don't diagnose your partner. And I think you're doing this because I think you're a little bit OCD. And I think you actually do. You're not a therapist. You are not a diagnostician. Do not diagnose. Just talk about your own experience and what you felt. Okay, even if you are a therapist, don't be a therapist with your spouse, okay? Be sensitive to your partner's triggers. That's the last pointer in the awareness section. Everybody has a trigger. Everybody has a past. Everybody has parents that they went through certain experiences with. I had a guy one time, a husband in a couple whose mom, he grew up in a house with like a really strict chore schedule. And it was just like something that he didn't want in his marriage. Guess what? The wife ended up being like a very neat, clean person. That was a sensitivity for him. He didn't want to be told all the time, this is the vacuuming day and this is the dishes day. So realizing that, look, this person went through this in their childhood and that's a trigger for them. Let me ease up in this area. Let me ease up with blame. Let me ease up with the you should statements. Let me ease up with lecturing, because these are things that trigger my spouse. We often know what triggers our spouse and we use it against them, right? As opposed to trying to avoid the triggers. Number 2 in the speaker's job, tolerance, okay? There is a story that a couple came to a wise man and the wise man's disciple was sitting with him learning from him. So the wife walks in the room and she says, my husband always does this and he does this and he does this. And he goes, yeah, that's so wrong. That's not right. Yeah, he shouldn't be doing that. Yeah. The wife feels good, she leaves. And the husband walks in and the husband goes, my wife always does this and she hurts me and this. And then he goes, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I don't know why she's doing that. And then he leaves. So the disciples looking at him, he's like, how can they both be right? How can you agree with both of them? He said, did you not listen to them? Did you not hear that they both had reasons for why they felt what they felt and why they reacted how they reacted? The point of that story is, I don't have to agree with you to respect your perspective. I don't have to agree with you to be able to understand where you're coming from. You know, a lot of times when people start therapy, their goal is to show the therapist how he is wrong or how she is wrong. And that's it doesn't matter. You're both right in your own way. When you listen to both sides of the story, you will see why both people reacted the way that they did or why they made the choices that they made. So even if I don't agree with you, I still respect your perspective and it's valid. What happens in a conflict is something called fundamental attribution error, which is that when specifically this happens in a conflict. If I'm fighting with you, if I'm in a conflict with you, I see myself as the victim. I see myself as the one who's wronged. I see myself as innocent, and I see you as a villain. I see you with all the negative qualities, and I see me with all the positive qualities. And this is because our worldview is very egocentric, right? So we're the center of our world. So this especially happens in a conflict. And so you can see this cartoon here is that when someone messes up, it's like, oh, so this is specifically about being late for work. You're late for work because you're lazy and you're not disciplined and you're not this and that. I was late for work because it was raining and there was so much traffic and Siri did an update on my phone. And so so when I mess up, it's situational. When you mess up, it's because something is wrong with you, right? And subhanAllah, like this is actually from our deen, right? This is from our religion that we have a good opinion of people. We have husn al-dhan is a concept in our religion that I don't attribute your wrongs to you being a bad person. I attribute your wrongs to a situation, which is what it usually is, right? And then this is the last part in a very important part in the speaker's role, that I want to transform my criticisms into wishes. Every criticism that you have of a person is actually a wish for something. You know, when a wife says like, why do you come home late every night? It's actually like, I wish you were home early so we could eat dinner together. Underneath, again, it's ego, right? It's much easier to criticize than to express a need, because expressing a need is a vulnerability, right? I have to kind of put ego to the side and tell you what I need from you, right? So instead of stop ignoring me, I need your attention. We want to say, it's much more common to express what we don't want a person to do versus what we do want them to do. I want to tell you what I want from you. I don't want to speak in the negative, right? Again, criticism triggers defensiveness. You want to convert your complaints into a positive need. Every complaint is actually a need. So it's all about, and this is why writing things down helps. When I write down my complaint, I can think, okay, what's a way for me to reword that, right? So let's look at an example, right? Rashid and Layla have been arguing about how often he comes home late from work. And this is what Layla feels, right? Layla feels he's always coming home late from work. Rashid is like, I'm working long hours, and even when I do come home, you're always complaining and arguing, so sometimes I stay longer at work on purpose. This is the situation they're in. They argue often, and whenever they argue, Layla gets teary-eyed and leaves the room, and this infuriates Rashid, right? So what Rashid actually wants to say to her, right, but he doesn't, because he is using these skills. You act like such a child. You always interrupt me and then just walk out, and then I like crying, and then I feel like the bad guy. That's why I don't want to be home often, right? But instead, what he ends up saying to her, I want to be able to talk to you without you walking off and without you getting upset before I finish. So he turned that criticism, and you see all the yous turn into I's, and he turned a criticism into a need. What I need from you is to stick with me in the room long enough so I can actually finish, and so I don't feel that you're always walking out on me. Again, it's Layla's turn to speak. Layla does some editing. Instead of saying, you're a rageaholic, whenever we disagree, you get nasty, anyone would get upset and walk away from you. Instead, she says, I want us to discuss issues calmly without either of us raising our voice. Look how diplomatic she is. She probably only thinks he's raising his voice, right? She says, I want us to be able to speak without either of us getting up to that like volume 10. That's why I need to stay, that's what I need to stay in the room and really listen. So the screaming is having Layla go out of the room, and she's telling him she needs him to just tone down his volume for her to be able to stay in the room. So that's the 3 for the speaker. A for awareness of my spouse's, what words I should use. T for tolerant, that we can disagree. Even though I don't agree, I still respect your point of view. And number 3, transforming criticisms into wishes. And over to Deana for the listener's job.
Remember to unmute myself there first. So thank you for that. So if you can see the State of the Union, it really is a dance. It's a dance between speaker and listener, with each of them being aware of the other person and aware of their role in this sort of scripted or in this blueprint that Gottman Rappaport came up with. And next slide, please. So the 3 roles here are the U and E, U for understanding, and again, not problem solving, and for non-defensive listening, and E for empathy. So to start with U, next slide, please. Okay, so I love this one, right? It says never meet the problem head on. And you can see what happens when you try to solve the problem before understanding it. So it comes out, it's like must have been a very vicious fight over there that this person had with the problem. So it's not your job as the listener to get your partner to cheer up or calm down or develop a sense of humor. It's not you. That's not your job as the listener. As the listener, you're really trying to understand the issue. And so to ensure that you can understand it fully, the last thing you want to do is rush, because if we rush through it, most likely what will happen is certain emotions will not have had a chance to really be addressed, and they will creep up later. They'll kind of just start to like bubble up and show up when we least expect it. So in order to ensure that we're taking our time as listener, it can be helpful to ask probing questions. For example, what else are you feeling? So just to, to create that space. Now, it's also important, I know we didn't really delve into this, but to be aware of our nonverbals. So if I turn around and I'm just like, what else do you want to say? Is there anything else you need? Like, obviously, I'm not showing a very, I'm not being attentive and in tune with the partner. So the intention that both speaker and listener come to the table with is to really understand and to go through this entire blueprint. So asking probing questions like, what else are you feeling? Or is there more that you want to say or more that you want to add? Those are things that are very, it really gives the message of like, we're going to take as much time as we need here to really understand this. And why? Because Gottman and Rappaport were genius. They figured that, the whole point, what really sets this apart from like traditional active listening or traditional conflict resolution is that each partner, knowing that they're going to have a chance to be the speaker, helps them like kind of calm down and just know that like, okay, my turn's coming up, so I don't have to sit here and work on defending myself right now. So that really kind of, it's just like, okay, they're going to share everything and I'll have my chance, so they can each calm down and fully be there in the process. So again, we want to understand, not problem solve. The N for non-defensive listening. Okay, this one, I love this. Why do you always get so defensive whenever I attack you? Well, I mean, hello, who likes to be attacked? So non-defensive listening often seems like it's impossible. If someone's coming at me, even if they're not attacking me, but if I perceive it as an attack or I perceive it as a threat, my reaction is going to be to defend myself. I need to show, kind of have to save face, even for like with my own ego, that it's like, well, I can't be a bad person. I didn't mean for anything bad to happen. So while the speaker's responsibility is to not flood the listener, so they want to be, aware of sort of what's happening, the listener's responsibility is to be able to self-soothe. And the self-soothing part, this is similar to what Unaiza kind of alluded to also earlier. Like if someone feels that they're being flooded, then what they want to do, maybe they need to take that, whatever, 10, 20 minutes away and do something completely different. When both partners are on board with this tactic of like self-soothing, if they need to take the space away, it makes it a lot better. When they're not, then one person is sitting there like, well, they're just over there like, talking to their friends on the phone and not realizing that I'm sitting here boiling and just so frustrated, right? But if both partners know that, oh, this is sort of like the situation with, because they're flooded and this is what they have to do. They actually need to not be thinking about this. Let me also take this time to not think about the problem and do something else. So some strategies for in the moment, let's say it's not flooding to the point where, okay, they need to go out and just take the 20-minute break, but it's more of in that moment, the listener sort of feels that things are coming up, they're bubbling up a little bit. They can do, these are two suggestions. One of them is to pause and breathe and to just, really focus on the breath and focus on the breath going in and the exhale, and just sort of like regulate that piece where they might even be sitting and just doodling with something, but just sort of putting a little bit of the attention to be able to calm down. Now they're not sitting there doodling or writing everything down, looking away from the speaker. They're still practicing the nonverbal, showing that they're attentive and that they're present. Another thing they can do is write down what the partner is saying and the defensiveness that the speaker, that you are feeling, okay? And this just sort of, it's a reminder of like, okay, so I don't have to sit here and put all my energy in remembering everything they're saying because I need to respond to that one point they made. It's just more of like, okay, they said this and I felt this way. So then when it's your turn to be the speaker, you can address it as needed. And again, regulating, knowing internally that it's going to be my turn to talk soon. So it's like, I'm going to have a chance to say what I need to say as a listener. So I don't have to be so fixated on one thing that was said and get stuck. And ultimately remembering why you're even having the State of the Union meeting to begin with, right? Both partners love the other person. Both partners respect the other person. And the purpose is to have an even more fulfilling relationship. And this is one of the tools. So keeping that in mind, it kind of keeps things on focus, even when things seem like, like maybe it's a little bit rough, but having the eye on the prize of like, this is going to be better for our relationship will, inshallah, keep things going more smoothly. Okay. And then the E for empathy. For this one, we talk about empathy all the time, right? It's like, okay, I want to be able to, step into their shoes, see what it's like for them to experience what they're saying. With the story of the disciples and the wise person that Unaiza mentioned, right? The wise person was able to step into each of their shoes and see that like they were absolutely right from where they are, from their perspective. And so that's how it is usually with couples too. So this cartoon, the first one says, can we swap glasses? It might help me to see your point of view, right? To put on the glasses they're wearing or stand in the place where they're standing. The other one at the bottom there, it's like two people just really looking and it's like, I wonder what it's like for them over there. And it's like, oh, this is what it's like for a person to be in this position. And, sometimes I know that even like for, as in my former life, somewhere over there, I was a teacher, and even to stand and like to see the board from where the students sit, right? One person is always sitting in the front, they're right close to the teacher. Their view of the whole classroom feels different than a person who might be sitting in the back corner, or the person sitting in the middle. Is the person sitting in the middle, like all they see is the person in front of their head, like just right there. So being mindful and being aware of each person's position and how they see things. So for this one, it's important to not get caught up in the facts. This is critical. So the speaker is going to be talking, listener. Speaker is going to be talking, and listener, you're going to be sitting there and you're just like, nope, that's not what happened. Nope, it wasn't exactly 3 calls later. It was 4 calls later. I called him 4 times before he answered, you know, or however way it is. Or, you know, she only said she wanted like 3 apples instead of like 10. She didn't specify. However that is. If we get stuck on the facts versus the feeling, we want to focus on the feeling. The feeling is what's going to allow people to, it's going to allow us to better understand. Because when I can connect with it, and they've done so much research on this, even watching movies with no language or with no subtitles in foreign languages. As humans, we are wired into and trigger see the feelings. So if we focus on the feeling, we will have way better chance at expressing empathy and feeling that empathy for our partner, which you can imagine would allow for a better outcome. So rather than report in a neutral term, listener, when it's your turn to kind of summarize back to the speaker what you heard, you could say something like, you know, neutral would be, you want me to be on time because if I'm late, it makes you feel like you're not important to me. Very matter of fact. How does this sound different though? If we say, it makes sense to me that you would need me to be on time. So I've validated as a speaker, I validated as a listener, I validated the other person's perspective, right? I've basically said like, it totally makes sense. Like, I get it. I get why you would need for me to be there on time. So an example of this empathy, if we go to the next slide. So here we've got Tamer. Tamer endures a back injury, becomes angry and defiant about his doctor's orders that he take things easy and not exercise. His childish attitude annoys and worries his wife, Mona, until she realizes that the injury triggered one of her husband's enduring vulnerabilities. His fear is that he's more fragile than other people because his parents died young. So to compensate, he just belittles and downplays any injury and denies that anything is even wrong. So Mona could go and say, like, it's important for you to do your physical therapy or your physical exercises, right? It's going to sound more like a criticism, but instead she says, I understand why you wouldn't want to start exercising again. I know you hate thinking that you might be weak, but honey, you're not weak. You're a strong, healthy man whose back went out. Mona's ability to attune to her husband and validate his feelings, which is that showing empathy piece, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to heal his back. It might not even make him start exercising or doing his physical exercises for his back, right? But what it is going to do is it's going to strengthen their attachment because he senses that she's there for him. Like he gets it. He's like, okay, like she actually she gets where I'm coming from. That piece is going to be critical for down the road. This is all planting into their emotional bank account of like all those good moments that they're able to have, and those moments for connection, which could have very easily turned into a huge disaster, right? So in this case, it really shows that part. Empathy goes so far. Go to the next slide real quick. Just so they can see the PFP website and email address.
Yes, absolutely. And so please check out the website. Please support this cause. They really do. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click that. They really are doing wonderful things and really bringing a lot of much needed healing and guidance to communities, and often issues that are taboos and that we want to ignore and turn away from. But if we can improve our marriages, we can really improve the quality of our lives. So thank you so much. We will send our emails in the follow-up email if you guys need anything from Deana and I. And you take care, okay? Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Take care. Yes, please consider donating to this amazing cause. Assalamu alaikum.